Alright, so before this video even starts, I just wanted to say that if you guys notice me being kinda monotone in this video, well, more than usual, I recorded this, like, literally right after I woke up, and so if I kinda sound tired or congested or whatever, then, yeah, that's why, and I didn't even notice until I started editing. But, let's just play the video, man. So if you've been following the NBA recently, then you'd know that there are currently talks to figure out the possible ways to resume the season. The season was suspended due to the pandemic on March 11th, and we've been without basketball since then. And right now we're looking at a return in either July or August, which will end up being the ending to the weirdest NBA season without a doubt. And this will without a doubt be a positive to basketball fans, since it's just not normal to have this type of thing happen. I would also be happy because I am running out of ideas. And so NBA executives have been discussing different plans to resume the season, which isn't really that crazy to think about. I mean, we still have the UFC going. And I will say that it was the weirdest thing watching a main event with no crowd, but hey, at least it's still going on, right? But anyway, some people have been talking about going straight into the playoffs. Others have been talking about shortening the season to around 70 or 72 games instead of the normal 82. Some have brought up the possibility of having 20 or more teams in the playoff bracket, and some have talked about the possibility of still having 16 teams, but in a 1 to 16 bracket instead of the usual 8 West and 8 East. And so today we're going to be talking about the NBA and what we could be looking at in the next few months as we start to head towards the comeback of the season. And also what might be happening after. But before we begin, if you're new here, I'm DoubleDworth. I'm a huge basketball fan and I make NBA videos here on YouTube. So if you're also an NBA fan, or just a basketball fan in general, feel free to hit the sub button and click the bell to be notified when I upload more videos just like this one. Alright, let's get into the video.
Kevin, there's an increased sense among the owners that ultimately they're going to let Adam Silver decide, along with the Players Association, the return to play proposal that he thinks makes the most sense, and that they will line up behind him. And that's the next step now for the league and for Adam Silver. They expect to have a decision sometime next week. And
Okay, so at the time of this video, there are currently plans to hold the remainder of the season in a neutral setting instead of traveling all over the country for games. And there were talks of holding the playoffs and remaining games in Las Vegas and Orlando, but their plans have been leaning more towards Orlando at Disney's sports complex at Disney World. And so this will be the center for all games. With only about 20 to 22 teams expected to participate, which I'm assuming would automatically be eliminating the teams that have no chance of making the playoffs anyway. And so these teams are likely going to be the teams that are currently in the playoffs and the teams in the West that are on the bubble and could potentially play their way in. And these teams are the Blazers, the Pelicans, the Spurs, the Grizzlies, and the Kings, who are all around the same record except for Memphis. So I'm not really too sure what's going to happen there, to be honest, because we also still have the possibility of just going straight into the playoffs, which would make everything that I just said completely useless because Memphis is still 3 games ahead of all those other teams. But if we do have, say, a 70-game season, that gives teams another 5 or so games to potentially play their way into the playoffs. But again, it all depends on what they decide to do. The NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has stated that on June 4th, the Board of Directors are going to vote on a plan to resume the season, which is expected to be largely supported. And so I think we can pretty much rule out the season just being cancelled altogether. But that would still put us at around late July and early August, with the possibility of having the finals as late as September, with Adam Silver also saying that the current target to resume play is July 31st. Alright, so let's talk more about the potential formatting we could see this season, because the reason we haven't actually come to a decision yet is because responses from NBA executives are still split on what exactly they want to do. The majority of executives have supported the idea of a play-in tournament that would decide the seeding, but a quarter of them also support the idea of a World Cup type grouping system. But the interesting part is that over half of the board of directors is expected to support the idea of going straight into the playoffs, but this idea isn't supported by most players. And this makes sense. I mean, with not really playing basketball for, 3 months, you need to have some sort of time period to get back into it. Especially since we're talking about, going into the playoffs only a couple weeks after. Because when we had the lockout in the 2011-12 season, that was probably the most injury-riddled season that I've ever seen. But then again, part of that was due to the fact that there were some stretches where teams were playing 3 games in a row, back to back to back. But the point still stands that you need to have some sort of time period for players to warm up before playing at playoff intensity. And so that's pretty much all I have to say about the current state of the season, because I don't really want to speculate too much. But I will make an update video once the board of directors actually votes on a solution, and when we get closer to the actual start date. But that's not all we need to think about when we're discussing this, because this will also affect the next season with everything getting pushed back. So let's talk about it. So the main side effect of continuing the season is that everything else gets pushed back. The draft has now been pushed back to a target date of September 25th. The Hall of Fame ceremony that was supposed to happen this year is now being pushed back to next year, and of course, by continuing the season, we're looking at a season that'll extend about 3 months later than usual. And so, this causes the next season to be pushed back. But the real question is, how long will that season actually be? Because one thing you also need to consider is the fact that the next season can't extend into summer because of the Olympics, which were also pushed back. And so it's unlikely that they're going to change the entire schedule for years to come based on this one season, because that would completely change the league forever, and I'm assuming they don't really want to do that. And so right now we're looking at the next season being shortened to around 50 or 60 games, assuming they don't do the same thing they did in 2012 and schedule a ton of games one after the other. Or will we have the shortest season in NBA history? Because currently the shortest season in the modern era was the 1998 and 99 season, where it was shortened to 50 games due to a lockout. But now with the new way of scheduling games where they're more spaced out than before and there's less back-to-backs, there's less 4 games in 5 nights, you would have to think that the number of games in a season from around Christmas until April would be around that or maybe even less. Right now the NBA is considering starting on Christmas, which is understandable, but they're in talks of also playing the next season into August as well. And again, I just can't see this happening given everything that's set to happen next summer, mainly the Olympics. But overall, I just think it's too far out to really know for sure what's going to happen there, because, I mean, we don't even know what exactly is going to happen with this season. But again, I'll be sure to make an update video about all of this. Bottom line is, we're finally getting basketball back to take our minds off of everything that's going on in the world right now, and I see that as a positive for everyone. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, subscribe if you're new, and hit the bell to be notified when I upload. Comment down below what you want to see next, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.